we'll see. I'll go through this again. I want to do, like each week, I've done a short review and then moved on, which is what I would like to do here again. You might recall. So we have this sense where there's me engaging with an object. Right away, there's an immediate response of one of three feelings, this Vedanta, it is in Sanskrit. So from Buddhist perspective, we start off with this positive, negative, neutral, happens really, really fast. The elaboration continues, right? It's sort of a timeline. The elaboration continues, say in a positive feeling can evolve out into any sort of enjoyable emotion, right? I put in, there are 16, there's actually more, but there's all sorts of enjoyable emotions within certain psychology classifications. I put contempt in for a bit of fun because some people enjoy contempt. Schadenfreude is another one, another enjoyable emotion that is actually kind of frowned upon, so that sort of taking delight in other people's misfortune. Uh, so you have this positive feeling. It can elaborate out into these emotions, into neutral kind of, people say they're bored, perhaps. The negative ones in mental health tend to be what we're looking at, which is there's multiple. I just use these examples of fear, sadness, and anger because they lead to, fear, repetitive, intense fear episodes will lead to anxiety, and sadness to depression, and anger to other dysfunction, and so on. Okay. So if you were here the last couple of weeks, that'd look fairly familiar. So I was sort of saying, well, what happens actually, it gets more interesting because here there's this interaction of me and an object, right? And then there's this other, it proliferates out, this thing happens here. But now what happens is because of, say having a positive response, positive feeling, now this whole thing sort of flips so that my experience is that the pizza is just flat out delivering me positive, like enjoyable emotions, like it's a good feeling. That is, the pizza has the inherent capacity to develop enjoyment in me. That's the appearance from my side. It's not what's happening, as we went through in the first week, right? Because there's an interaction here, right? So I interact with pizza. I like pizza, positive, unless of course it's the 12th slice of a large pizza, in which case it wouldn't develop a positive response. It would develop a negative response, lead to other issues here. But what's important here is Corey interacts with pizza. There is some kind of that leads to this interaction leads to a positive feeling, a positive response, and then on, right? But for me here, what it looks like is someone's put pizza in front of me, and that pizza has delivered to me enjoyment. This is delusionary, right? This is incorrect because I already established that, right? Because that pizza isn't necessary. If that were the case, every time I ate pizza, in fact, the more pizza I ate, the happier I'd be, right? And that's just flat out logic. You can't get around this. There's no, that's just it. If the pizza could inherently deliver a positive response to me, there would be no time in which the pizza could make me unhappy, right? I would just keep eating pizza. I just keep being happy, which is not the case. I've tried. Okay. Same is true for all sorts of other things. You can start playing around with this quite a lot. Some of this gets uncomfortable, where this will come up in the CEB course when we talk about happiness. Yeah. So for example, we often think that, say, so I'm very happily married, for example, but there's this sense that being married delivers me the happiness, or my wife, being married to Kirsty makes me happy. But the same thing is the issue, right? If that were the case, then to be happy, all I would need to do is spend all my time with Kirsty, which I guarantee is not going to end well, So it's like there is this sense there's more to it than this, right? There's more going on. There's a contribution from my side to the experiences that I'm having, but it's not the appearance, and this is the issue, right? The appearance is I'm married to my wife, and so that delivers me, this marriage delivers me some sense of happiness. The pizza delivers me, the new car, the new job, these things deliver the happiness to me, right? That's what it looks like, but it's not the case, right? And the biggest problem for someone like me, is the case that having studied this for some time, and real some sense of it, of the truth of this, nonetheless, the appearance is always the same, right? The appearance is always that the the thing is delivering the happiness to me, that there is some potential in that inherently in the object to deliver happiness, or of course, unhappiness, right? So here we go. That moved on, that proliferates out into, and what I'm getting at here, and I mentioned too, what we're talking about in Buddhism, of course, are mechanisms. There are mechanisms of suffering. Remove the mechanisms, you can disable the mechanisms, you are left with liberation, which apparently is a pretty good time. I've yet to experience it, but I have it on good authority. So there's these mechanisms that go from a really raw experience proliferate out into more complex experience of emotions, which can become dysfunctional, right? And again, lead to things like anxiety, depression, and other dysfunctions. And again, there's mechanisms here that do that, right? So you've got this first interaction, then you've got this immediate response, right? Positive, negative, neutral. From there, there's a further proliferation, which is the word I'm using very deliberately, because in Tibetan, we use this in Buddhism, this, end the proliferation, choba, it is in Tibetan. That means the mind is proliferating out like this. And then there's more mechanisms here, okay? I looked at some, just to come back here, this section here, leading from emotions to emotional dysregulation, emotions to disorders, there's all sorts of mechanisms. This is where psychology is quite clever and really helpful. I spoke last week, I think, about say mind wandering, and how there are different types of mind wandering that lead to this, and that this more uncontrolled type of mind wandering leads to anxiety, depression, and others. Same for rumination. I spoke 2 different types of rumination, and this one type, this brooding rumination, again, leads to depression, also anxiety, turns out. And that mindfulness training, based on research that I've done and others, seems to mediate this, so that the higher your mindfulness scores, the better attention skills you have, the more you tend to be in this adaptive, reflective area of rumination rather than this maladaptive, right? In addition, even though that's the case, it doesn't still tell us why. This is the issue. So mindfulness training gets you out of brooding into reflective rumination. Why? That's the actual question we want to know. The answer is there's mechanisms. What are the mechanisms? This is what we need to know, right? And this is where Buddhism is extraordinarily helpful and clear and well thought out and testable, which is important. And psychology is kind of coming around, because they're the new kids on the block, right? Psychology is what? 1890, 1880, something like that. 150 years maybe. Yep. Buddhism has, a few thousand years head start. And better technology, frankly. Okay. So that's sort of where we're at. I posited the that to come back here, this mechanism here as reification. This is where we got to sort of last week. The idea of misapprehending or confusing mental activity for its referent. What that means is treating a memory for an event. So the mental representation of an event as an event. So for some of you who've heard this before is okay. If you haven't and you need to interrupt me, feel free. Okay. Because I'm just rolling through this stuff. Thoughts and ideas as facts is another example. So if I think that all people, I don't know, something dumb. If I think all people from Chicago are stupid, for example, just an opinion. It's totally dumb opinion. But if I believe it, it becomes my reality. Everyone I meet from Chicago, oh, you're from Chicago. I just think, oh, stupid. It's actually reality for me, So again, there's a reification of the thought. I can have the thought, everyone from Chicago is stupid. No worries. It doesn't have to affect me at all. But the degree to which I reify it, the degree to which I treat it as fact, is the degree to which it's going to alter my perception, right? So this is important, partly because I have a friend coming from Chicago next month for a visit. Or the mental images as the reference. So, I gave that example of, I can have a mental image of my mother, and if I react as if it's my mother, that's the mechanism. I treat the mental image as my mother. I have this response. I can do it with my friends, like I can do it with my enemies, have negative reactions. I can also do it with drop bears. I can do it with things that don't exist at all, right? I could, if I wanted to, develop a phobia of unicorns, just by sitting around and reflecting again and again on how dangerous unicorns are, and just if I start believing that, pretty soon I can develop a phobia. I don't think it would be a very useful thing to do, obviously, but you could. Yeah, future plan is a current event and so on. How are we doing? Is this okay so far? I've lost my people. Anyway, okay. So here's where we're at. So I'm just going to keep jumping back and forth today. That's what we've got. We've got this reification mechanism. We'll go into that. That's why we're here a little bit. But there's also other ways that we can sort of affect this, the way this timeline pans out. I mentioned last week, we have this sense where people who actually were taught about these things, people were taught about emotions, taught about brooding, about rumination and mind wandering and worry and these things, and had that explained to them, they actually did better in this study we did than people who did not. So they did less meditation, but they actually did better in anxiety and depression than the groups who. So with, if you were here, you might remember, we got a group and we gave them 4 weeks of just education about emotions and then 4 weeks of mindfulness training, and they did better than groups who did 8 weeks of mindfulness training, right? But the idea being that they had an application for it, and they had the application beforehand, they understood it. There's a bit more to that, which is where I started to play around today, that I don't think I spoke about last few weeks. So we're talking about this area here, right? Rumination, mind wandering, and so on. And did I mention this last week? Emotional granularity. You'd probably remember. Oh, I did. Okay. All right. Oh, so I've done 3 things, and I do forget what I've said to who. But there is this sense that that by being able to name an emotion or an experience, it actually dials the intensity down. So in the grip of an anger episode, you can say that's, and if you understand, oh, this is anger, that just that recognition alone seems to dial the intensity down. Really interesting research, very clever. I would say reification is implicated in that, but even so, this sense of switching yourself out. And so this is why in the research I did, which used this CEB course, right, that we're starting on Saturday, what it did, it does that. So it helps you understand what's it like to be angry. There are different types of anger. What's it like to be afraid? There are different types of fear. And so not only do you recognize, say, oh, this is a fear episode, I'm in the grip of a fear emotion, but there's different types of fear. And so once you start to be able to get this granularity, right, understand it, then it really starts to distance yourself from it. And then what you want is the emotional reaction itself, not to drive your behavior, but to be kind of a signpost, we say, so that you think, oh, something important is happening. What do I do now? That's what emotions are supposed to do, but often they hijack us, which is the problem. So this is where we've got to this idea of granularity, or we call it psychology, but doing the education, the emotion skills, and giving them some emotional granularity here seems to have had a really big effect. And then we sort of have the people meditating, and that's having this de-reification effect. And the de-reification effect is all of this. I hope that's clear. Anything going on in the mental domain, any mental activity, de-reification is affecting that. Well, it's being de-reified. So when the reason I came in here for these 4 weeks is to talk about ways in which we can use psychology and contemplative or Buddhist approaches for mental health and well-being. Well, here is a really, really clear way, right? And it's based in a lot of research that's quite clever, based in 2,500 years of peer review that's very convincing. If you can help people understand the mechanisms, understand what's going on, then you can dial down the intensity. If you can train their attention and beyond, but if you can do some meditation, contemplative training, contemplative technology, I like to call it, then you also have this two-pronged effect that's going on here, right? And it seems to be very, very powerful. Yeah. Because people enjoy it. It's a positive feeling leading to an enjoyable emotion. It's not a positive emotion, it's an enjoyable emotion. People enjoy contempt. Yeah, not everyone, but I can tell you I enjoyed it quite a lot till I reckon I was in my mid-20s. Yeah, I would say I almost perfected it. Perfection of contempt. I mean, I did a jazz degree, right? The whole jazz world is based on contempt. It has to be, you know. It's because I'm better than everyone else. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so you got to keep. So let's pause for a moment and just examine that because again, from this perspective, and you read this, I would argue, and I'm not alone, but I would argue there is no such thing as a positive emotion, and there is absolutely no such thing as a negative emotion. Right? I think this is damaging terminology. I think it's really problematic. It oversimplifies things to the point that it prevents people from understanding what's going on for them, and it prevents pushes for high levels of mental health. Because if something's negative, if fear is a negative emotion, then we should remove fear. Is that okay? If it's negative, we should get rid of it. I mean, that seems obvious. Yeah. But fear will save your life time and time again. It will have for sure for all of us. When a child runs in front of your car, if you see a snake, if all these sorts of things, fear will save your life, right? But there are people who don't experience fear. They have a calcified amygdala in the brain. They don't experience fear, and you can't leave them alone, right? They don't care. A war zone, a gang fight, a snake, doesn't matter. These people aren't afraid. So they actually don't know to stay away from things that are threatening, right? So fear, the idea of fear being negative is a huge mistake because then everyone sits around thinking, I shouldn't be afraid. Or these idiotic, you see these idiotic sort of things on social media, like someone sent me this thing a while back that fear stands for something like false emotion appearing as real or something like this. Yeah, this is the dumbest thing I think I've ever heard. And because firstly, it's an emotion, it's not false. So shut up. Secondly, it's appearing as real. It is real. You are afraid, right? And there's nothing wrong with being afraid, especially if you're under threat. So shut up. This is a dumb idea. The idea that fear is negative is a huge mistake. What we have, though, what is important is constructive versus destructive expressions of emotion. This is a big deal, right? And this is the mistake I think that gets made. So you have a sense that you have, are you with me so far? If it's positive, if it's negative, you should get rid of it, right? And that's obviously a dumb idea. So let's not do that. Okay. But if I'm constantly experiencing it, or if the expression of that emotion is destructive, then yeah, we have a problem, right? And it might be destructive to my mental health. It might be destructive to people around me or both. Right? This is a big deal, and we need to do something about that. But it's not a negative emotion. Of course, that means there's no positive emotions, right? Because if emotions were positive, we should just experience them all the time, which comes back to the pizza issue, right? Just have pizza all the time or something. It doesn't work, you know. So yeah, this whole idea, and where it comes from two areas. It comes from psychology talks about negative and positive affect, right? So an enjoyable experience versus unpleasant experience. We call this affect, right? And so, for example, fear is negative affect, right? It's an unpleasant experience. I 100% agree. Is it a negative emotion? Absolutely not. And so what happens is people say negative affect, then they just swap that out for emotion, and then they go on and they just basically limit and hobble their ability to achieve higher levels of mental health because they've been duped into this dumb way of thinking. Yeah. Yep. It still slips out. I catch myself saying it sometimes. Absolutely. Yeah, negative emotion. No, 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 no. It's the wrong way of thinking. And again, it comes down and this I feel bad about this because like there's at least one psychologist on Zoom. I don't know if there's any others around. That uh that psychology is just not very good at defining its terms. The terminology is not really, it's problematic. And different psychologists or different researchers have different definitions for things. It's a real problem. And it's not the case in Buddhism. It's really, really clear, you know, and especially the language in Tibetan. And it's kind of clear because, it doesn't matter why. Historically, we can come to that. It's quite interesting. But the point is that it's very, very clear. And because Buddhism has always been about understanding the mechanisms, like to come back to how I started on day one, it's about understanding the mechanisms that cause suffering and then deploying or using technology that will interrupt those mechanisms. That's what it's always been about. So the better you understand the better you understand the mechanisms and the better you understand the technology, then the more effective you're going to be. It's always been like this. So that's psychology is sort of coming around, but it's so new, and there's these still misnomers and mistakes and unhealthy ideas in psychology that we have to get around, because the subtlety of this negative positive emotions is problematic. Have a person with anxiety, for example, and they show up and they say, I have this anxiety, I would like to dial it down, I really want to get rid of it. Yeah, anxiety is nonstop, like not nonstop. Anxiety are fear emotion episodes at higher intensity and frequency. That's what anxiety essentially is. So the person thinks fear is negative. No, no, no. An anxiety disorder is negative. I'm cool with that, right? But fear, no. But if you think, so now you think, well, I have to just get rid of fear all the time, and fear is irrational. No, fear is not irrational. Probably an anxiety disorder is verging on irrational, or well and truly irrational, maybe. But the emotion isn't necessarily. So the second you start thinking these things are negative, it puts you in a bind, right? Because you have to just try to accept that it's always negative, and it's not, right? The same with enjoyable emotions. You don't always want to be experiencing enjoyable emotions. You don't want to be there. Say, if I just trying to enjoy myself all the time and I have to go to a funeral, for example. Yeah, I mean, sure, it's a kind of joke, but imagine it. It's not a good idea, because you want to be, one of the things of function of sadness is this sense of loss that brings communities together and finds support. It's the function of sadness, you know. So actually it's okay to be sad, right? So yeah, so that's I can't even remember how I got started on this, if I'm honest. But oh yeah, negative emotions, that's right. So that's a much better way to think about it then. How do I said this once already today, at least, that what emotion should be is a signpost, like an alarm system, that something I think important is happening. That's what an emotion should be. If I can identify it as fear, and so I understand emotions a little. So think, okay, I can identify it as fear. That means I'm perceiving a threat of some kind, right? So then I can start analyzing this, and I can do it really fast. These are fractions of a second. You can do this, and then I can determine if the fear that I'm experiencing is constructive or not, or destructive. Same with anger, same with sadness, and so on. Yeah, sure. Mhm. If, so take care of the dereification part, then the rest should take care of itself. Yes, essentially, almost. Actually, almost is a better way of saying that. Almost, and we're going to come to that actually, because there are different types of meditation that are just so you target the dereification, but then what do you do? Because yeah, it gets the implications of what I'm saying are huge, and I'm going to get there. So you are right, and I'm glad the diagram helps. This is a new one. I just came up with this like whenever, last week, the week before. Okay, how are we doing so far? And so I've sidetracked negative, positive emotions a bit, but it's important, because it's if I'm if I'm in a dangerous if I'm in a sort of threatening environment of some kind, then feeling fear all the time is okay and probably quite helpful. If I'm in a really supportive and safe place and I'm feeling fear all the time, it's a problem, right? The emotion isn't negative. It's the expression and the experience of the emotion being constructive or destructive is the issue, right? Oh yeah, so in amongst all this, so this is where I was at. I have this sense that I remember now, we talked about contempt being positive. So I just want to come right back to this. Sorry. This is how we got here. I have contempt here as being an from a positive sort of response to an enjoyable emotion, an example of an enjoyable emotion that isn't necessarily very helpful, right? Again, contempt is contempt. So while I'm at it, because I find this stuff really interesting and you're stuck with me for now. So contempt, you say it and it sounds negative, right? And it sounds negative. It does. I agree. But actually, what contempt will do is it will maintain a social order and avoid conflict. It's quite a sophisticated emotion, actually. It's also, interestingly, the only emotion for which the facial expression is asymmetrical, right? I'll try and do it. It's just I'm about to laugh, and it gets hard once I start smiling because I used to be really good at it. It's like this. It's the lopsided smile. It's just the sneer, this like, and because contempt has this sense of superiority. It's like, so someone pushes in front of a line at the movie theater, or does anyone go to movies? I can't remember someone pushes in a line in front, a little bit of contempt will hopefully make them think twice about what they're doing. But my favorite story for contempt, because I learned all this stuff while I was at Sydney University and years when I came back from India. And the fourth floor of the Fisher Library, I know some of you heard this before, at Sydney University is silent, right? And so I was in my 40s, of course. I've gone back to uni to do this psychology. Well, I went back to do a Sanskrit degree, which was awesome. While I was there, I did a psych degree, which was okay. And I'd study on the fourth floor because it was allegedly quiet. And then there'd be these people half my age, and they'd sometimes be noisy, right? And so I would, because of this CEB training, I have all these facial expressions. So I would try it out on them, right? Yeah. And contempt works like a charm. If you like an anger expression, you pull your eyebrows down and your eyelids up. This is what a glare is. If you can tighten it anyway, you just get a glare back. Especially when you're old and they're mature age student and no one thinks you're boring. And so you sort of glare at them, you just get a glare back. You can try looking sad, it just confuses people, but contempt works almost every time because they know they're in a silent floor. And they just get like you look at them, you just get a flash of what, just and then they know that they're doing the wrong thing and they just shut up. It was great, So the point being, it maintains the social order. Uh, primates show it. Chimpanzees will show it. When an alpha male's challenged, they'll just give this contempt flash and asymmetrical facial expression, and often they won't. The challenge will just be dropped. So the idea of contempt being negative doesn't make sense because it actually avoids negative outcomes a lot of the time, not all the time. Okay. Yeah, I just find that stuff really interesting. It's also just while I'm here, it's an example of like, because I've already sort of had a go at psychology for its terminology. So now I'm going to come back and say, like, there's been a lot of research and work done. We understand emotions quite well, and they're quite interesting. And psychology has you have a lot to learn by understanding this in your daily life, how these things work. So it's fun to drill down a bit. So here we are. This granularity, right? This education we give people so they understand the mechanisms, they understand the emotions and so on. Then we give them the contemplative technology here, the training. They start to de-reify all these things so that the idea of something being, if you deliver me the pizza and I have this positive experience, this positive reaction, where does that happen? Well, it happens in the mental domain, right? It's a mind. Yeah. And everything in the mental domain is subject to a reification one way or another. So this is what you're talking about in Buddhism. So you can de-reify all up here in the emotions is very helpful. Here in terms of rumination and so on, I showed you those mechanisms. De-reification helps, for sure, helps. But actually, from a Buddhist perspective, I said on the first day, the playing field is back here. You develop high levels of attentional skills, and then you try to de-reify these things, right? Just the initial response. And this is really serious work if you can, sort of do this. But anyway, we're interested in it. Anywhere things are happening in the mental domain will be affected by de-reification. So it might actually be, if you understand how all this works and you understand, and someone puts pizza in front, I might be able to have the initial response of it as a good idea, but the de-reification and so on might help me undermine that and reevaluate this. We call it reinterpretation or reframing in psychology, to actually reframe it as a potential cause of suffering, which would be helpful for people who eat too much pizza, right? Or drink too much coffee. No pointing fingers here. Okay. So here's where we're at. Another area where this gets really interesting, because we touched on this last week, and last night we touched on this anyway, is pain. So I've talked about this in the past a little bit. Imagine this. Pain, we talk about intensity. We measure pain in a lot of research by its intensity, how disturbing it is. So it's a perception of pain, because I can't measure how much pain you're in, but I can sort of measure, you can rate it for me on 1 to 10, So we take people, and this wasn't my research, this is by someone else. I'll post it online so you can read this or hear this podcast. It's so interesting. He came up with, or this research team came up with a bunch of so-called placebos. Okay, mindfulness, like I don't really think of these as placebos necessarily, but anyway, and these were to help people with ongoing and chronic pain, right? All of these, so prayers, this TMS, distraction, trying to get them to think about fluffy bunnies and stuff, all these things significantly reduce their experience of pain, which is cool, right? This is great. Through the clever part of this research is that they know how we have a natural analgesic system. So in the body, there's these natural opioids, right? And that they dial down pain. Okay. So a lot of these, in fact, these ones on the right-hand side of the screen, these other placebos, that a placebo in this case was like a pill that does nothing, medication, fake medication. All of these dialed down the experience of pain, and in doing so, they activated the endogenous opioid system. So it actually had a physiological response, which is super interesting and very cool. Except the mindfulness training. So mindfulness training significantly reduced perception of pain without activating any physiological response. Super interesting, right? And so, like I say, I will share this. There's a podcast with this researcher interviewed that is so interesting. I'll put it up on the thing. So of course, this is cool because they're researchers. Then they all sit around and they think, I wonder why, which is what research is about, 95% of it, right? It's like I wonder why. And so I was listening to this in the car one time, hearing him talk about this research and go, well, we've known for thousands of years why, right? It's because what reification will do is it will take your experience, the actual physical experience of pain, and then all your ideas, opinions, emotions, all this stuff about the pain, right? We put them together, we fuse them, we reify them, we treat it as one thing. Like when I say, yeah, I have a pain in my knee, for example, when I say that, we all think it's physiological, but it's not. It's mixed in with all my emotions about it too, and my thoughts and opinions and ideas and memories and fears, right? And what mindfulness training and reification will do is separate them out, right? So, because that's what de-reification does. I can take the actual experience, the physiologial pain, separate it out, all the mental aspects of that experience, divide that up. And the thing that I will posit as an hypothesis for you to test is that everything that goes on in the mental domain is malleable. Nothing is set, right? It's all malleable. And that's what contemplative technology is for, is to make those changes and make those differences in the mental domain. So again, super clever research I'm really excited about. There's more, or the therapeutic kind of angle of de-reification is almost limitless, it seems. Is that okay? Is it randomly interesting? Very interesting? Yeah, go for it. Yeah, sure. Emotional pain, of course, that is happening in the mental domain, right? Of course. And there'll be the um the it becomes about how helpful the response is. If I have some emotional pain, some sense of loss, if I'm feeling loss is a good one, then the issue becomes really is how adaptive and how helpful are my responses to that being. It's a very clinical way of thinking, but it's worth it. Because you think, yeah, actually, just feeling a sense of loss and being sad might bring people in for support. It's basic function of sadness, which is great. but also it might prevent me from getting out and getting things done. So this is leading to depression, So there needs to be some point at which we reappraise what's happening and decide what's best for us, if it's pain or something that happened in the past. We spoke about that last week. There's events of the past. Your memory of an event is not the event. So there's the separation, right? The memory is malleable. Uh, and if we use an example I've already given you, which is also my area, rumination. So I have an event in the past and I'm remembering the event, and then I'm reliving it. The degree to which I'm reliving it and re-experiencing it is dependent on the reification of the memory. A completely de-reified. So if I have a really difficult memory of the past and it arises, the degree to which it disturbs me isn't about the content, it's about the reification. The degree to which I reify the memory is the degree to which it will disturb me. Does that mean that the event is unimportant? No, it doesn't mean that. That's what people hear when I say this, doesn't mean that. What it means is that the potential that my past has to disturb my present is based on this reification mechanism. And there are very few ways to dial it down except through contemplative practice, to my knowledge. And then, so I hope that's helpful. Then I've got the pain example here. If this reification idea is new to you, it will take some time for the significance to sink in, because it's everywhere. Your whole experience is reification. Opioidergic, yeah, on the right.
That would have an effect on the mental side too, wouldn't it?
Look, it would have to. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I would expect so. I think so. The placebo would give you the space to activate. For example, a placebo might give people the space to activate this other technology, the contemplative side. I think the same about medication in psychology. There's a place for it, and it isn't a cure, because there's no cures in psychology. I went through this on the first week. Um, but it does give people space to try something else, and I really think that would be really helpful for that, to give people the space, to dial down the anxiety, the depression, the OCD and whatever, to give time to try the left-hand side. Yeah. No, I think that's what it should be used for, but it's not a great business model, is it? Yeah. Okay. So I don't want to get in trouble, but I do think it's helpful. In that space online, I posted 2 articles. Actually, I posted another one today, but on ADHD. There's a brilliant article in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago that really pulls it apart. Really fascinating read. It's a long read. You need a cup of coffee and a cookie or something to sit down, but really worthwhile. So you'll find that on the New York Times or in my supporting content as well. Okay. Where am I at? Am I sharing or not? Share. So yeah, these things on the, yeah. All right. And then just to come back to this pain idea, this is straight up from a sutra from Buddha Shakyamuni, the name of which maybe it's in the next slide. Monks, an uninstructed, I love this translation, ordinary person, right? Monks, an uninstructed, run-of-the-mill person feels feelings of pleasure, feelings of pain, feelings of neither pleasure nor pain. So we've seen this, right? Positive, negative, neutral. A well-instructed disciple of the noble ones, this is, Buddhist, also feels feelings of pleasure, feelings of pain, feelings of neither pleasure nor pain. So what difference, what distinction, what distinguishing factor is there between the well-instructed disciple of the noble ones, Buddhists, and the uninstructed run-of-the-mill person? The answer, the Buddha, he says, when touched with a feeling of pain, the uninstructed, run-of-the-mill person sorrows, grieves, and laments, beats his breast, becomes distraught. So he feels 2 pains, physical and mental, just as if they were to shoot a man with an arrow and right afterwards were to shoot him with another one, so that he would feel the pain of 2 arrows. It's called the Arrow Sutra, the Alamatra Sutra, I can't remember. So here it is, straight up from Buddha Shakyamuni himself, talking about reification of pain. you know. That's exactly what it's about. The second arrow. So it's this idea that physical pain, there's two aspects to it. One, maybe you don't have much you can do, Panadol only does so much, right? But there's a whole other aspect of it that you have complete control over if you do the training, put the time in. Yeah. Okay.
Whole lot of ones on the right hand side there, and the one for mindfulness. One of them was called distraction, was it?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the mind off.
Yeah.
And you like moving to music or
Distraction, go for a walk, go to the movies, do stuff like this. That's what they mean. I really object to this terminology. Sorry, I've been objecting so much. I was going to skip over this, but now we've come back to it. You can have my pet peeves because you've all come. I kind of object to this terminology of distraction because it's not really what's happening, right? If you think about distraction is like I'm trying to do something. I'm trying to write an email, and I'm writing it, and then I'm thinking, oh, I should probably feed the dog. I'd like a coffee or something like this. Distraction are the impinging unintended thoughts. You're trying to meditate. I'm going to, okay, we'll do this in a moment. I'm going to focus on the body and just focus on the body. The distractions are the interruptions that come in involuntarily, that come up and say, did you leave the stove on? Like, why didn't you say this to that guy? All these things that come at you. The distractions, so you've got controlled attention. Distractions capture your attention away, and the captured attention is the issue. So again, this is an issue with terminology, because if I'm thinking, I'm trying to live my life and not get caught up in this thing that I keep remembering. We'll use the same example. I got this issue from months, years ago, or whatever, and it keeps coming up, and um, I'd really like to get past it and move on and live the rest of my life, like this. And then I don't, because what's happening is, as I'm trying to focus and live my life and do the things I want to do, I'm becoming distracted by the memory of the event in the past. The distraction is the issue, not the solution. And the second you start calling you start controlled attention distraction, then you lose all this terminology from Buddhism. It all just falls apart. It's just because when it comes to contemplative ways of thinking, they're dealing with amateurs, really. So that's the sort of problem. In actual fact, distraction's the problem, and controlled attention that can pull your awareness away from this is the solution. So I really object to this terminology when people are saying, it's like if you're being distracted by this thing all the time that's causing you distress, then go distract yourself. Well, no, you're already being distracted. Go and pay attention to something. And attention, mentioned in the first week, has, I can't remember. Attention has an emotional component. We're better at attending to things that we're interested in. So go do something you're interested in that will be easy to pay attention to, that will create a sense of flow, or these sorts of things. Go and do that, because that will stop this. What they mean by distraction is diversion. Something like this is a better term. But we're stuck with this really, really intelligent people talking about, experts in attention research talking about this. Yeah. Oh yeah, thank you. Sham mindfulness. So I'll have to, I haven't read this for a while, so I forget exactly, but it's they talk about breath work and these sorts of things. So it's not actual mindfulness training. It's like they called it, what they did is they called it mindfulness, and they trained them in something else, so the people getting the training didn't know the difference. So they gave these sort of breath work thing, I think, which is more about and doing these sorts of things. I would have to read this again. I haven't read it for some time, can't remember, but it was an interesting one that the sham mindfulness still created the same effect as the other placebos, and then the actual, let's call it, mindfulness didn't. It had this other effect. Yeah.
There's a lot of neck practice. If you start to breathe it.
Yeah, this breath work stuff. Yeah. Oh, there's a huge amount of interest. And I mean, it's okay. It actually has a physiological effect, So these people aren't making it up. But of course, as a Buddhist, as someone interested in the mind, then there's always this the mental domain is always going to be more interest for me, but that's not true. Yeah, no, thanks for that. Sham mindfulness. Like I say, I'll put that interview in the online thing. Yeah, I forget his name, Fatal something. Okay. Uh, so so with all that in mind, then here's the deal, really. Think about mindfulness training, or cultivation of mindfulness. Then what we're trying to do is just pick a particular focal object, which you're familiar with this, attend to the focal object, and then notice when we're distracted, when we're pulled away, basically when we forgot. Because mindfulness just means remember, or bear in mind, and distraction is forgetfulness. This is how it works in Sanskrit, in Tibetan, and Pali languages as well, traditionally. So one of the things that happens, there's several, and this is where we'll go next week a little. What happens is this, people start to learn that even when my attention gets pulled away to something else, it doesn't matter, it just makes you normal, right? So my attention gets pulled away, that actually I can release, I can relax and bring it back. I actually have this power over it, which isn't how it feels. If you are an untrained run-of-the-mill person, like if you haven't done the training, it feels like every time you're distracted, you're at the mercy of the distraction. It does, I get it, right? And what happens now is if in a meditation session a few times you can catch yourself, relax and pull your attention back to a chosen object, you start to know and see for yourself it's not like this, that actually the control actually lies with me, right? Doesn't lie in the external, coming at me in the distractions. The power lies with me. And then over time, as you get more and more of sort of facility or better at doing this, then the things that go on in the mental domain become less threatening and less concerning, right? That is, we get less, fear. We change our attitude towards it over time. And as we change our attitude towards it, it de-reifies, it becomes less powerful. Our attention skills increase, our emotional activity dies down. All these things happen, and it happens from just this ability to notice when my attention's pulled away and do something about it. Simple. So if you do notice that you're distracted, always you just relax. So you just very quickly scan through the body, release tension. Just sort of as you do that, just release the distraction and reset your attention back on the chosen focal object. It's like this: relax, release, reset. As you do, you might notice, and as you do this introspection skill, you might notice that the same parts of your body get tense when you're distracted. This is really helpful information, right? Because now you've got two ways in. There are two ways to stay focused. One, of course, is to stay focused, to monitor my attention, but the other is also physiological. So I might notice tension in my face or my shoulders or my knees or somewhere, and that's a little alarm bell. It's like, oh, so now my body's tense. What it should do is trigger me, if you like, or cue me to check the mind, right? And then the reverse is true. If I notice that I'm getting distracted, then that should cue me to check the body. And then the mind stays relaxed, the body stays relaxed, because you don't develop really high attentional skills that we're talking about through top-down forcing yourself to pay attention, right? What you do is you harness your natural awareness that's going on anyway, and you can't actually stop. So you harness this natural capacity to be aware and channel it where you want it to go, rather than have it hijacked and pulled away. So this idea of the body, you don't want to slouch, but the body just being relaxed, the breath flowing naturally, and then the mind, we talk about this resting your body, speech, mind in their natural states, right? So that's what's going on. And the implications behind this are basically everything I've said the last 3 weeks, right? Anxiety, depression, emotions, relationships, pain, other things I've forgotten about, right? All this stuff that starts to be de-reified and dialed, all the power of this starts to be dialed down, and just by this ability to stay put and stay focused. If you can't stay focused for very long, it doesn't matter, because if you're noticing you're not focused and doing something about it, perfect, right? That's the issue. And the only way to sort of train to do it effectively, the only way to really train to do it effectively is to spend some time in these meditation sessions, right? You fall back one last time. Remember, meditation really is best translated as cultivation or familiarization. Like if you look at the Tibetan and Sanskrit, that's why. So this idea that actually I'm cultivating mindfulness, I'm cultivating the ability to bear things in mind, to attend to things, right? How do I do that? Well, I use mindfulness and introspection, the way we've looked at the last few weeks, and away you go. And then I'll and then you get the payoff for free in the outside world, but we'll do that next week. It's okay. Is that all right? Any questions before we do that? No. I guess the reason I say that is because, so I'm just setting a timer. I'm not like just, checking how my wife's doing. Hey, I feel like, lentils for dinner. So, ooh, yes,
Scanning the body to relax the
sure.
background. I think that is very good. Usually okay. So when I started to relax the eyebrows, I feel more relaxed in the other part of my body.
Uh-huh. Thank you. Thank you. Look, that's this relaxing between the eyebrows, you start to notice. This sense of relaxation, like intentionally relaxing the body, you can just keep doing it for ages. Like you keep thinking, oh, I found this more subtle thing. And then you do that for a while, and then you keep going, no, you'll find more and more tension. It's really interesting. And the more subtle tension you notice here, right? In a meditation session, the more subtle you're going to notice in the outside world, which is going to tip you off to on upcoming emotions, right? So there's this real benefit. When the first sort of lengthy retreat, more than a few weeks, that I did, was a shamatha retreat, mostly this mindfulness training. And I think in the second week, I realized that once I'd followed 2 breaths all the way through, this is a long time ago, by the way. Whoa, 15, I don't know, 15 years. Once I'd followed the breath all the way through twice, at the end of the second breath, muscles here relaxed. Muscles I didn't know were tense. It was so interesting. I'm doing this thing of just scanning and relaxing, relaxing. But every time I do this session, if I followed 2 breaths all the way through, these muscles would relax. I didn't even know were tense. So yeah, and then you just keep going. It doesn't happen now, but it was helpful then. Yeah, you can never get this, how to say it. There'll always be tension it's always worth doing. And that's why we start with some things that are quite subtle. Sorry, I've gone on and on about that. I forget why I even got started. You don't need to know my tension issues. Okay. So let's do this. Remember, any meditation session, ideally you're in a position that's unique for meditation. It's not something you do other things in. Gotcha. Okay. Just start with the motivation, right? Why are you here? And so that might be easy, it might be hard. Maybe you'd like to be in control of your emotional reactions and what you say and do. That's really helpful. Maybe you'd like to get further and actually even undo the mechanisms of suffering. Maybe you would like to do this because you see it would be of benefit to your community as well, right? And with whatever understanding you have of how this works and why we're here, release the tension in the body, just scanning through. Start between the eyebrows, just work your way down as best you can. It won't be perfect, it's okay. Releasing unnecessary tension all the way to your toes. Just when you feel it's good enough, doesn't have to be perfect, it won't be. Allow your awareness into the body, and we'll just move on to the main event, where you direct your awareness towards your chosen focal object. And you have two. One, you can choose either the sensations of the body moving as you breathe, or just the sense of contact with the chair or the cushion. Choose one and stick with it. Anchor your awareness in this focal object. Allow the body to rest in its natural state, the breath to flow in its natural rhythm as best you can. And very deliberately and intentionally, just check in on yourself regularly. Quick scan through the body. Is there tension I can release? Quick check of the mind. Am I on target or distracted? Really, the question is this: do I need to make an adjustment in my mind or body or not? If I do, make the adjustment. If I don't, great. Just leave it alone and rest in an uninterrupted flow of attention on your chosen focal object. If you notice you're distracted, that's great. You know what to do. Relax, release, reset. Same if you notice you're tense. It's okay. It's good if you notice. And if you find it helps, then allow that exhalation just to relax and settle you. Right? If you find you're distracted and bouncing around, then when the body breathes out naturally, just incrementally relax. Relax without losing clarity. If you find yourself becoming lethargic and sinking, allow the inhalation just happening naturally to refresh your interest and sharpen your focus, but without losing relaxation. As you use this introspection to check in on yourself, if you notice tension, that's great. Release it and check the mind. If you notice some kind of distraction or dullness, that's good. Check the body. You want to be relaxed without slouching. You want to be alert without being tense. Even if you can just notice the physical tension and release it, is actually a big deal. It's the beginning of going a long way. Even if you can just interrupt a distraction and bring your awareness back, it's a big deal. So it doesn't matter how often you get distracted, it only matters that you notice and do something about it. And really, as best you can, just allow the breath to happen. Let the body breathe itself. It's surprisingly difficult not to control it. And you're just channeling your awareness to your chosen object in the body. With this natural oscillation of the breath to help you settle, if you need to, on the exhalation on the way out, or to sharpen your focus and refresh your interest on the inhalation as you breathe in. Otherwise, just resting in stillness, attending to your object. Now, without changing anything really, just call to mind that motivation that you started with that brought you here. Really feel a sense of having put in the effort, not just in the meditation session, but just getting here in the first place, thinking about this, doing the practice. Maybe you've had some success through your practice in the previous weeks, months, or years. Right? Call that to mind too. And you can try to feel this very session as that, the vehicle that takes you from those successes of the past to your aspirations of the future. Mindfulness and introspection helping you de-reify problematic mental events. And you can add to that a sense of how you may benefit others, people you encounter in your community. Okay. Has that any thoughts, questions, comments? I'll do this next week. Nothing. Okay. So that means I'm either super clear or just completely confusing. Oh, that's why. Sorry. So I'm just going to finish up with this rather than sort of throw new stuff at you. You've seen this already. Whoops. Fairly familiar with this. I'm kind of trying to pin this whole four-part series on this, and the reason I'm doing that is because there's the sense that psychology is kind of operating around here and quite sophisticated and clever ways, whereas Buddhism's kind of aiming down here, and that's a problem for most people living in the 21st century, because no matter how Buddhist you are and convinced you are of it, it's very hard to sort of operate in this domain, right, around here, because it takes really, really high levels of attention skills to get there. It takes serious training to be able to do this, right? So we're usually operating around here. So if you come and you get Buddhist teaching and practice and these sort of aimed at this, that's all right. But if you're operating up sort of in the emotional and maybe even over here, but in this domain, it's hard to get sort of consistent effects from the practice, right? Without a retreat or something. Whereas, of course, if you're only working in the psychology, field of things, you're getting these kind of sophisticated symptom management, but all these mechanisms are still in place. So these two sides really work together to kind of remove the road bumps, the roadblocks to getting these kind of more subtle things up and running, right? And it's very clear and kind of easy to understand. So that's where we're at. So I'm just reading this question. Is there any benefit to doing box breathing or the making breath out longer on the out breath when doing the focal point breathing? So let's just stick with that for a moment. So there are different systems and techniques and practices. If you are developing high levels of attention skills in this system, I would say no, right? Like it's about the natural breath. It's about harnessing your natural ability to focus. Does that mean you always have to do it my way? Or it's not my way, but do it this way? No, you should try things out and see what works for you, actually. I'm not, you should try things out. So I don't know the box breathing. I've come across it and I understand there's research into it. I guess it's like this, because it's research, including some of my own, it sort of tends to be at this end of the spectrum, So if you find that the box breathing helps here, no worries. I'm not so familiar with it. Will it help over here? And the overall de-reification, probably not as much, I don't think. I'm going to go a bit further on that. So I don't know. So I do think you should try it out and test these things out for yourself. I'm not very dogmatic about it. And so the same thing, longer on the out breath when you're doing the breathing. No, not from this perspective, not developing these types of skills. If I'm in a yoga class and my yoga teacher says, breathe out longer, then I do what I'm told. It's a yoga class, no worries. But not if you understand this system and what we're trying to do with this, I would argue this is a tried and tested way of doing it. Does that mean you should never do this? No. So I hope that's a sufficiently gray enough area. How does de-reification work with emptiness? Great question. We'll get more into that next week, but I'll show you in just a moment here. Like we'll get started on that. Very Buddhist way of thinking, which is great. In fact, let's do that here. So here's the deal. I hope that's all right, Emily. If that's not, just drop something in the chat, or speak up. It's okay. So here's where we're at. There's one last piece of the puzzle here. Of course, I keep going on, de-reification, blah, 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 all this stuff, it's in the mind. Corey engages with pizza, everything's in the mind, blah, 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 mind. It's true. Corey also exists in the mind. This is where Buddhism sort of kicks in, right? So that in actual fact, it's if all I have is my interpretation of things, right? This is my entire reality, which it is, and this is uncontroversial. Quantum physics, neuroscience, cognitive psychology, Buddhism, we all agree. My whole experience is my interpretation, right? Which means my whole life, my whole reality is different than yours. Although we all agree on that it's a table, we have all different ideas about the table. Like there's, for sure, So and I've got time. So that is, in Buddhism, that's a conventional reality, right? It's quite literally a convention. So my experience of this table, is different to all of yours. That's no big, that's just true. That's just the way it is. But of course, just like me, for you, you think it's like you're accessing the table for real, but you're not. I've only got my interpretation of it. But there's a convention, literally a convention, right? We can all agree it's a table. It functions as a table, it does these things. So no worries. Even though your table is different than mine, we can still agree and just get on with life, right? This is conventional reality. Right? It's important because people like, Indian scholars like Chandrakirti, especially Chandrakirti, he says, you want to understand the ultimate. This is what made me think of it, Emily. If you want to understand the ultimate reality, just understand conventional reality properly, right? You understand conventional reality, you'll understand the ultimate reality way more easy. So yeah, my whole reality is my interpretation of what's being presented to my senses, my 5 senses and the mental domain, of course, is what's being presented. So of all the things that are being presented, or all the sorts of things that I am interpreting, right? One of them is me. You just can't get around this. There's no way around this. If all of my reality is interpretation, then that includes me. Yeah. And so that's okay. It's no big deal. But of course, just like I believe that I'm accessing the table exactly as it is, in like some kind of video camera that's really taking in the table. I think the same about me. I think I'm right about me and how I exist. It's not the case. I only have my interpretation of me. Yeah. And but I have this idea it's the same me. But here I am, supposedly teaching, so I'm up here kind of teaching. And then I think it's the same me that goes home to my wife and talks about things. But no, when I get home, I'm husband. And we'll talk about things that Kirsty knows more than I do, for sure. So like, then I learn stuff. So, but I think it's the same me everywhere, but it's not. All we have are these interactions. One of my sort of main teachers these days, Alan Wallace, he says, there's not me, there's just me, you. Like I only exist in relation to how I'm interacting with everything around there. It's me, you. It's a way more actually accurate way of thinking about how things are functioning. It's a me, you. So But that's not how, again, it's not just as the pizza appears to be delivering happiness to me, because that's how it looks. Same thing, I think that I'm right here just doing my own thing, independent of all of you. Yeah, that's not really true. So now, if you're going to talk about reification, like reification of past events, reification of events, worries about the future, reification of mental imagery, reification of opinions, like all this stuff, well, then the same thing is happening in relation to myself. So the thought comes up. So you can, and it's coarse and subtle. Coarse ones is, for example, if I do something stupid, let's say I say something stupid, and then I fuse with the action as me. Go, you're an idiot, right? People talk to themselves like this. I mean, I do a bit too sometimes, but like say, oh, you're an idiot, you're stupid. Why are you so stupid? Be based on something I did, and we agreed last week that a person's behavior is not the person. Right? We even agreed I kind of forced you to agree. There are no good or bad people, right? There's only people's behavior. So that it applies to me too, right? And so this is where it gets really, really interesting and really subtle, because if I'm wrong, given that my whole experience in the world, in life, always is only an interpretation of things, right? So it's only how things are sort of in relation to me, so to speak. And then I'm kind of mistaken about me. By default, I end up mistaken about everything else, right? Which doesn't matter so much, because we can all agree on enough to get by, right? Like tables and cups and things, it's no big deal. It's okay. But this is this idea of this reification of this soul of me that exists over here, independent of everything else, right? The same way I don't think that I think that I'm actually perceiving a cup rather than interpreting a cup, right? There's not very high stakes, it's just a cup. But for me, it's an issue. And that reification of this solid sense of me from a Buddhist perspective is actually the root cause of all suffering. So it gets quite important. And not just suffering for me, but all suffering that ever happened in any universe up to date. So it's kind of important. So you have this sense then that this mechanism, reification, the mechanism that turns reflective rumination into brooding, that turns this same mechanism, you just start moving from this right-hand side of the timeline and you start focusing more and more and more here. At some point, you're going to be able to try to de-reify this. And then people think, oh, then I won't exist. No. You'll still exist, but you'll understand how you exist. Because in Buddhism, the issue isn't whether you exist or not. People think, oh, I don't exist. That's crazy. If you don't exist, we don't have to talk about suffering. We can all just forget about it. Clearly, you exist. The issue is how you exist, right? That's the issue. And if I mistake the way I exist, then I mistake the way I engage with the world. And if I mistakenly engage with the world, at some point, I have a head-on collision with actual reality, and it's a problem. And this is where we're at. So in actual fact, understanding this is why I love this system so much, the idea of understanding reification in relation to brooding, rumination, and so on, mind wandering and worry, and these things that I worked on, understanding in relation to anxiety and emotions and these things, understanding in relation to feelings, positive, you keep pushing back like this, and you get more and more and more subtle, you get more and more power, right, over how you're going to engage with the world, until eventually you can just get super Buddhist about it and target this reification of self itself, right? And is this all right so far? Because I'm just winding up. So this is the part that, in fact, I should have kept sharing that gets even more interesting. And the point I want to make about that before we go is that up to now, I have sort of been talking about this all as, as mindfulness, because the key element, sorry, everyone's squinting. I'm thinking that my font isn't big enough to see. But I'll go through this. You keep talking about it as being mindfulness, and it's true. Mindfulness training will de-reify things, and it will happen naturally. It's one of these three overarching effects of mindfulness. We'll go into that more next week. De-reification, object orientation, and meta awareness are these three that we'll look at. But what we have here is I mentioned there's different types of meditation. And so this is here, like meditation, better translated as cultivation, right? And this is one way of dividing it and thinking about it, because there's all different types of meditation. So two types, placement and discursive, or you could call it active. It's often translated as analytical, which is good and nice. An interesting little issue with the Tibetan. It says Cheba, which is, anyway, that's not your problem, that's mine. So you got meditation. There's a placement type and a more active discursive type. We are looking, the mindfulness training we're talking about is entirely in this domain, placement. There are two types of placement, focused attention, that's what we're doing. There is another type called open awareness. We'll do that as the C. You need some training for that. That's a bit more advanced. We'll do that in CEB and retreats and stuff, but we can't really do it in the weekly thing. But the point is this, you develop this type of stability in the placement meditation, right? And when you get a bit of stability, then, and you can see why. I can stay focused on things for longer. Those things are naturally de-reified, so they don't have the power to interfere. I have this clarity of vision. It's like having a telescope now that I can sort of see through the atmospheric distortion of my own sort of cognitive fusion, my own reification. I can see through it and start to analyze and look and better understand things, better observe them. And that's when we flip over here to the more active side. And here there are two types. There is an analytical, that this is vipassana. It is in Sanskrit, or vipassana meditation, insight meditation, and this sort of cognitive type. I like this classifying them as deconstructive and constructive is a nice way of thinking about it. So these deconstructive ones are about taking my reality appears to me like this, but actually there are parts to it and causes and conditions and all these things going on, and it starts to pull them apart so I understand them better, right? There's this emptiness idea and so on. That's what the deconstructive is for. And then you've got this constructive side, which is actually developing qualities that are going to help me get through this, which are kindness, compassion, equanimity, and what we call empathic joy. We'll have a look at that if we have time next week. So, but the point being, once you have a little bit of stability or a reasonable amount of stability in your mindfulness practice, you flip over and you start doing these more active practices. And these are the ones that target what I'm talking about. Sure, mindfulness training will naturally de-reify things and help you settle, but then there's like scalpels and things you can use to really start to slice it up and cut it and understand it and pull your reality apart to better understand how it's constructed, right? And that's sort of how it operates. Mindfulness training in and of itself simply isn't enough. It's never been the end game in Buddhism. Never, never. It never will be. It never has been, right? And the modern mindfulness movement, it's all about just be mindful and, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. They don't understand what it's for. It's to be used as a tool to liberate yourself from suffering. And in order to do that, we need to develop qualities that include the people around us and concern for them. And it needs to actually pull apart our reality so we understand what's happening. And then if we deconstruct it completely, we can put it back together in the way that will be of the most benefit to me and the most benefit to the people I encounter, and stop, and in doing so, undermine, disable the mechanisms that cause suffering. Does that make sense? Even if it doesn't, we're finished. But that's what my point for that was, just that there is mindfulness isn't enough. There's other bits to this. I keep going on about as if mindfulness is all, because that's the first part, but actually there's more to it. And so that's a point needs making because it's not out there enough. Anyway, it's 2 minutes past 8. I don't like to keep you after 8. So thank you all here and at home. And please do get in touch if you have any questions, and if you'd like that extra content and everything, just send me a message. You're free to go. Thanks, everyone. Oh, if you want to show, yeah, sorry, I'll share my screen. So if you do one who's got I'll just share my screen here. And I think yeah, if you want to find that, I think this is, sorry, I've been playing around with this slide in the past. Come on. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, so that QR code will do it, but you can just get in touch with me. I'm happy. All right, thanks, everyone. Oh, yeah, Saturday.
That's online, see whether we can study back in July, we can get the event calendar out.
That's actually why we're doing the CEB over June, because it's so hard to schedule such a. And so when LTC is closed, makes it easy to come in and yeah. I just have to break a window to get in.